I just all of a sudden had a moment where I was like, what was I talking about again? Don't worry, I remembered. I know you were worried, right? I first want to acknowledge that I am not from here. And when I say not from here, I mean I literally was not born in this place, in what we call Seattle, but what is also the coastal Salish territories. And we're literally standing, sitting, your feet are touching land that was first inhabited by the Duwamish peoples. And y'all go to a middle school that obviously recognizes the importance of Native history and Native peoples. But I like to start there because if we're going to talk about justice, but we don't acknowledge the land that we're standing on and the peoples who are here, and if we're unwilling to talk about how this land was taken, it wasn't like Native peoples were like, hey, it's cool, like y'all can have the land that we live on. In fact, we stole it. And so I start there because we cannot talk fully about justice or talk fully about Black Lives Matter without acknowledging all of our history and by telling whole stories. So how many of y'all take a history class? Awesome. History is a story that we tell. History is our way of, in the classroom, passing down the stories that matter to us. A struggle that we have here in the United States is we don't always tell the whole story about history. Have y'all ever told a part story before? Mm-hmm. Also known as a lie. Okay, thank you. Thank you for your honesty. So here's the thing. A lie doesn't always have to stay a lie. We can tell whole stories. Even after we've only told a part story, we have the opportunity to tell a whole story. And did you all know that we are all characters together in one big story together? We're all playing a role. I want to tell you a story about my first encounter of choosing to be a part of the Black Lives Matter movement. I had just finished my first year of law school, and law school was very challenging for me. First of all, I wasn't even sure if I wanted to be in law school, but also you read a lot in law school, and I'm dyslexic, so it made reading very challenging. So when I finished that first year, I was very proud of myself. I had also gotten the opportunity to have an internship at a place called the Center for Constitutional Rights in New York City, where they were working on a case called the Stop and Frisk case, which was looking at how police in New York City actively stop and stop more often Black and brown folks and white people to search them with the suspicion that they maybe have committed a crime or they have something on them. And so this case we were working on was to challenge that in the courts and to stop that practice from happening. So similar to what we're talking about with Black Lives Matter, it was another way in which Black people, but Black and brown people, were treated as less than equal to white folks. So I'm working on this case, and I get home from work, and what I see in my newsfeed, how many of y'all have social media? Awesome, I'm cool like y'all, I do too. But in my newsfeed, stories are popping up about the George Zimmerman trial. And George Zimmerman is the man who killed Trayvon Martin. And at the end of the trial, he was acquitted of murder, which means he was found not guilty by a jury because of a law in Florida that says, it's called a stand your ground law, that if you feel threatened, you can use force to protect yourself. I'm going to tell you the story of Trayvon Martin. Trayvon Martin was not much older than most of y'all. He was 14 years old. He was walking from his home to a convenience store to buy Skittles and Arizona iced tea. How many of y'all ever bought that? Yeah. Word. That sounds like a lot of sugar. So he's walking to and from the store wearing a sweatshirt, wearing a hoodie. Some of y'all in here in this room right now are wearing a hoodie. And he's walking with his hood pulled up. Some of y'all walked to school today and will walk home today with your hood pulled up, similar to the way Trayvon Martin did. He was in his neighborhood where his father lived, and He wasn't doing anything unusual. He was doing what young people do, going to the convenience store to buy candy and something to drink. And in the process of that, George Zimmerman saw him and was afraid, essentially. Believed that Trayvon Martin was doing something he shouldn't be doing. And so he was a part of a neighborhood watch group, and he began to follow Trayvon through his neighborhood. How many of y'all would have been afraid if a grown man started following you through your neighborhood? That's very understandable. That is very understandable. So, in the process, and I hope that y'all have some time this week in your classrooms to talk about this, because it's very clear that you have some thoughts about it, so teachers, take notes. But in the process of him being followed, he became afraid, like George Zimmerman. And there was an altercation between the two of them. And we don't fully know what happened, but what we do know is at the end of that altercation, a 14-year-old boy was killed, and I would say murdered. And he had simply been walking through his neighborhood, wearing a hoodie with his hood up. And the only thing that made him different than a lot of you, some of you, is that he has black skin. And what we know in the United States is, if we were willing to tell whole stories, tell a whole history, is that the United States is built upon the stealing of land from Native peoples and the enslavement of black people who were used to grow crops, who were treated as property, as a way to build wealth. And while that's our history, that has an impact today, and part of that impact today is the mistreatment of black and brown peoples, and very specifically black people. And in the eyes of the police and sometimes our neighbors, black folks can be viewed as threatening and are treated as threatening, which often results in harm happening to black communities. I tell you that story because I want y'all to have the history of where Black Lives Matter came from. Similar to how I was feeling in New York City when I saw the story roll through my timeline. I felt sad, I felt upset, I felt afraid. I'm mixed, my mother is white, my father is black, and I have 4 beautiful black nephews. And I could see their faces in Trayvon Martin's face. And so I decided that day that I was going to go out into the streets in New York City and I was going to protest. And while I was protesting, I was walking with different people, and different mothers would tell me their stories of their own children's experiences with police in New York City. All of these were women of color. And so it got me thinking. And while I was thinking, there were also 3 wonderful women, 3 queer black women, Opal Tometi, Patrice Cullors, and Alicia Garza, who in their own cities where they were wondering, how do we get the story out about what is happening to black people, black children, and black communities? And they decided to use social media. They developed a hashtag. And the goal of that hashtag was to find a way that people across the United States, but really people around the world, could share their stories of encounters with police, could share their stories of the ways the systems that we live in, the schools that we go to, still have a negative impact on black community. And as a result, that hashtag took off, and people started using it, but also as people would gather in the streets to protest and to find ways together that we could come together as community and change this, they started using Black Lives Matter as a chant. So this week in your schools, we're getting the opportunity to talk about why it's important for us to say that Black Lives Matter and acknowledge that. By saying that, we're not saying that anyone else's life doesn't matter. What we're acknowledging is that because of our history, because of the stories that we're sometimes uncomfortable to tell, we have allowed a world to develop, a world to happen where black people are treated as less than human. And that results in sometimes black folks being murdered, and it results in black children being suspended or expelled from school more often than white children, and it results in the school-to-prison pipeline and mass incarceration. And so we want to find ways as a community, as learning communities, as schools, as our neighborhoods, to figure out how do we change this system? How do we tell the whole story of history and do what's just? Word?
Word.
I'm going to do a poem for y'all, but before I do that poem, I just want to remind y'all that we do live in a city that is really striving to do the right thing. And we live in a liberal city or progressive city. Y'all heard your parents use those words before? Word. And we're wanting to build a city that not only believes that Black Lives Matter, but finds ways to make sure that we treat everyone as if their life matters. But our city still has issues. Charlena Lyles, Che Taylor, John T. Williams are 3 people that were murdered by police in our city. We have a school district that still really struggles with suspension and inequality in that Black and brown children are more likely than white children to be suspended in our school district. And we still have a jail facility for young people where Black and brown children are more likely to be jailed than white children. And so we need to figure out as a community how we're going to come together and make sure that every single one of you and all of your siblings and all of your cousins all have the same opportunity to grow into the whole person that you want to be and that your family wants you to be. Word?
Word.
Cool. I'm going to close with this poem. So in law school, sometimes, often, I would tell stories of what I was doing in my work. And one of those was participating in the Black Lives Matter movement in Seattle. And a part of that sometimes made my classmates uncomfortable. The beauty of art, whether it's playing music or it's speaking and sharing a poem, is you can have experiences in the world and then you can turn them into a way to change the world by turning them into art. How many of you are artists? Awesome. I hope this week y'all make some art. So here's a poem that I wrote. Do you see the boy in the corner? Yeah, you know the one. With the prettiest blue eyes. Do you see the way he looks at the class? How he carries well-intentioned honesty like a badge? How entitlement wears his shoulders like a mantle and privilege holds his hand? Do you see how he looks at me like target practice? Fires off Nikkita. When you say Black Lives Matter, you make me feel like you're saying I did something wrong. You make me feel like you're calling me racist. You make me feel like he continues. The world cannot hear his words, but I can feel them. They are a pulse on our nation's vein. He says, you make me feel guilty for being white. But I didn't shoot the boy in the streets. I don't want his blood in my hands. This is not my weight to carry. See, all of a sudden his words hit me, and I become shell-shocked rubble, heavy with the prayers of ancestors and other tongues I need to understand. I become slave ship, chattel and parcel thrown overboard when my flesh cannot complete the journey. I'm stolen, mouth that cannot speak my language when my tongue still is not mine, when history still is not mine, when I am auction block property, runaway slave, shared crop land stolen by genocide and broken treaty. I am black boy blood on pavement, black girl face down in dirt, black trans woman skirt, shirt torn. I am hands up, please. Do not shoot us while we are carrying our children's bodies through underground railroads. I am fist bro power, black beauty and Selma's son. Heat beat down on pain with hope so we can march again and again and again. Each time it's still the same. They say, just give it more time, Nikkita. Time. Things will change, but I cannot control this riot in my skin when waiting for justice burns like pepper spray, like blunt object, like police baton shoved in my face, showing you the tired beast of a mass that cannot wait for the boy in the corner, wanting me to wash his hands, but I cannot. Let him open this can of worms, go fishing for answers in skin that he will never swim, so these waters are not safe. This boat has always been an unsafe place for me, with no one who understands why the streets are wailing, why the air tastes of iron, why the ghost of Mississippi will not leave us, why Katrina is still burning, why the humidity in Ferguson drips like blood on New York concrete with roses caught in the cracks. They say, I cannot breathe. We cannot breathe. They cannot breathe, so I become fire, burn, billowing tower of smoke and civil disobedience. I become revolution. Was this country not built on revolution and on gunfire, on protests, on the backs of black bodies ripped from black wombs? They say, pull yourself up by your bootstraps, black girl. But the ones I was given would not fit, so I made my own, and I called them Black Lives Matter. Is not an indictment. It is not a prosecution. Please do not make my black skin your conviction when I say Black Lives Matter. I'm not trying to take anything from anyone. I'm simply trying to remind myself that my black life matters too. My black life matters too. My black life matters too. Thank you, y'all.